Hi, today I'm going to analyze a game between Levon Aronian and Vladimir Kramnik, which was played today in London in the Canals tournament, where 8 players currently play for the right to compete against the world champion Viswanathan Anand and play for the world championship. And the situation before the game was like this: Carlsen leading with 7.5 points, Kramnik following with 7 points, and then Aronian with 6.5 points. This meant for this specific game that a draw would not help anybody. Either player would need to win to try to catch up with Carlsen and still have a chance to get into first place. So let's get into it. Aronian started with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and it seems here that Kramnik is aiming for Nimzo Indian, but in fact after knight f3 he transposes with d5 to queen's gambit positions. Knight c3. And now this has come as a surprise for Aronian, since the Tarrasch opening which Kramnik shows here is not that popular on top level games. So I'm pretty sure that Kramnik want to surprise Aronian here. c5. c takes d5, knight takes d5, e3, knight c6, bishop d3, bishop e7, a3. The point of this move we will see in the next move. White want to play queen c2 without having to worry about moves like knight b4. c takes d4, e takes d4, and now white is threatening still to take on h7, which black prevents now by playing f5. And this is indeed a novelty. Usually black played here h6 or knight f6. And f5 and those kind of positions always a pretty compromising move, because black not only weakens the square on e5 but also weakens the pawn on e6. But of course there are advantages too. Black gets more access to the center, and as we will see later in the game, there's another advantage of this move. And I'm pretty sure Kramnik prepared this line, and since the position is very concrete, black can probably play this move without getting punished for it. Castling, bishop f6. Kramnik now immediately tries to put pressure on the pawn on d4. Knight takes d5, queen takes d5, bishop e3. And white would like to play bishop c4 now and push his queen away from the central square here, but black prevents it with b5, which is again slightly compromising because black weakens the c file a little bit, the square on c5, but on the other hand he can develop the bishop on b7, where he has a good diagonal. The long diagonal for a bishop is always, well, the best way to place the bishop. So queen e2, bishop b7, and now we should maybe make a short break and look at the position. And indeed Kramnik had the better opening, and Aronian should have gone for a draw here with bishop takes b5. He played rook ac1, then slowly his position gets worse. But okay, it also one has to acknowledge that Aronian is a fighting player and he didn't want to take a draw here after 50 moves. The draw would have been possible like this: bishop takes f4. White can't really take because of knight takes d4. It's really annoying. So white plays bishop c4, queen e4, bishop d3, and both sides repeat the moves here. But okay, as I mentioned before, a draw would not have helped anybody, so maybe this is also one of the reasons why Aronian decided to go for rook ac1, a6, and now rook fd1, and now f4. Yeah, this move was lying in the air for some time already. Black is distracting the bishop from protecting pawn on d4, and just take a look what happens here. Bishop takes, knight takes d4. This is devastating for white. He can't obviously take on d4 because of mate on g2, and if white moves the queen, then just knight takes f3 and position gets really bad for white. So rook c5 was the idea of Aronian to push the queen back, queen d6, but now the pawn is obviously protected, so white has to come up with something else. And it is indeed already slightly difficult, and I guess it was the whole idea of Aronian to sacrifice a piece here with queen c2. There was another possibility, but it is also worse for white. Bishop d2, knight takes d4. White sacrifices an exchange temporarily here. Knight takes d4, queen takes e5, queen takes e6 check. If now king h8, white can play queen h3 and further put pressure on h7, also threaten knight e6. This is why rook f7 is stronger. Now bishop takes h7, king takes, queen takes f7, queen takes d4, queen takes b7, rook d8, and now white even is a pawn up, but this pin is really annoying, and black is also better here. He might even go for the endgame of queen d5. So queen c2 is definitely the better practical chance, because white gets some good attacking chances. F takes e3, bishop takes h7, king h8, f takes e3. And now indeed Kramnik makes a mistake with knight e7. He should have played rook a c8. The idea is, if white plays, for example, rook h5, white is not threatening anything really. In most variations where, for example, if white wants to play bishop g8 and puts the queen on h7, black can always escape via f7, e7 is in most variations just fine. So you could just take on d4 here. That would be alright. And also, pretty interesting, if queen b1, black can also take on d4. And white can't take back because of bishop takes d4 and the rook is hanging. So you would need to go for rook takes c8, but this position is also very good for black because he's super active. Okay, let's get back to the game, knight e7. But now Aronian misses the chance to further increase his attack. He plays e4, which looks good too. He wants to go for e5, but there was a good chance rook h5. Rook a c8, queen e2. White is threatening bishop e4 check and winning a bishop on b7. So bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, bishop g5, and now bishop d3 check, king g8 and queen h3, and the attack of white is still alive. And if one looks further with the computer, it's even white who's better here with g4, and white can further attack. But Aronian goes for e4. Now again, Kramnik doesn't play the best move. He plays rook a c8. Very good was queen f4 to get out of e5, and now after rook h5, black has a nice maneuver here with knight g8 followed up by knight h6, and he just maintains an extra piece. But I guess after rook a c8, Kramnik already saw what was coming up, and he saw the end game, which we will see in a few moves, and he said to himself, well, I can only win this endgame, and I don't know what happens after other moves, so I guess it was a pretty good practical decision. e5, and now bishop takes e5. It gets really, really complicated now, and all moves which kind of are kind of forced. So what's going on here? White can obviously not take with the rook because the queen on c2 is hanging. Can't take with the f with the pawn because the rook is hanging on c5. So he's forced to take with the knight, and he can't take here and now take here because black can check, and white is forced to play queen f2, and in the end this bishop is hanging, and if rook d7 then a bishop takes f3 and black keeps an extra piece. So knight takes e5, rook takes c5, and now if the queen takes, then black just takes back and takes the bishop in the end. But Aronian planned something. He had this intermediate check on g6, knight takes, and now attacks the queen, and if the queen would need to move now, then white would just take back on g6 and would be perfectly fine, even better probably. But Kramnik calculated everything perfectly and saw bishop e4, another very strong move. White can't take on e4 because the rook is hanging on d1, so he takes on d6, black takes on c2, bishop takes g6, bishop takes g6 was also forced. And now we take a short look. What happened? What kind of position has evolved? We see an endgame, black is a piece up, but it's not so easy because white has 2 pawns for a piece and is pretty active. And there are not too many pawns left for black, only 3 pawns left. And the more pawns, the better it would be, because without pawns, just with rook and bishop, black can't win, obviously. So the endgame should be better for black, maybe technically winning, but still not easy. Bishop d3, a good move, threatening mate. h4, a5, and c6. And now Kramnik chooses the wrong plan here. This is common saying, the rook should be always placed behind the passed pawn, and this is what Kramnik does here, but it would have been better to play rook c8 here. And let's say if king f2, just bishop c4, rook d6, and bishop f7 with the idea to play bishop e8 and just take this pawn, and black will win. After rook f1, what Kramnik missed was the following idea here after rook c1. Rook e3 with the idea to exchange rooks and go into the pure endgame with a minus piece, but still with chances. Rook takes, b takes c3. And this endgame is indeed really complicated, and I can't really say if it's winning for black or not. But compared to the position before with the rooks on the board, one can certainly say that white has a lot better drawing chance than before. King g8, maybe g6 was better to be able to play the king on f6. In the game, black won't be really able to do this, but I don't know really. King g8, king g. Now he played c7 first, which forces bishop f5, king g3, king f7, king f4, bishop c8, and now white tries to gain as much space as possible and plays king g5. And now Kramnik just waits and wants to see what white plays. h5, bishop e6, g3, a4 certainly makes sense. Put another pawn on the collar of the bishop. And now g4, king f8, king f4, king e7, g5, king d7, king e5, bishop g8. The best place for bishop because he keeps an eye on those pawns here. c8 queen, king takes king d6. It's now threatening to play king e7. Of course, black can't allow this. And so far, both players played perfectly fine. The position is actually a draw, but it's not that easy. King c6, king e7. Yeah, if black goes for his best chance here with king 7. If he plays bishop c4, then white can just play h6, take, bishop d3, and now yeah, it's pretty simple actually. He can just play h7 and take this pawn here, and it's the wrong pawn. It's the wrong bishop for the pawn on a1, for the square on a1. So it's just an immediate draw. Okay. So king e7 was the better chance. King takes b5, king e6, king a4, king takes a4, king f5, and now this is the critical position. White had to decide whether to play h6 or g6, and one move loses and one doesn't. One holds the draw. Yeah, it is kind of decided by one tempo. It's pretty amazing. So Aronian chose g6, and this is indeed the losing move. What is the difference? The difference is that in the variations with h6, the king is one square further away from the queen side and from the white king and his pawns. So let's see, h6. Of course, black doesn't exchange the pawns, and it would be a draw immediately. So he plays g6, king b5, king takes g5, a4, king takes h6, and yeah, we can just look at the basic variation. There's several ways how white can achieve a draw. Just look at this: a5, g5, a6, g4, a7. Okay, bishop d5, otherwise black would lose. c4, bishop a8, c5, g3, c6, g2, c7, g1 queen, c8 queen, and yeah, even without this pawn a7 would be a draw, obviously, because queen against queen or bishop is a draw, and if black takes now on a7, then just exchange queens and we have a draw. Yeah, and the main difference, as I said, is that the king was on h6, and in this variation he was on h6, and he was too far away from the queen side. After g6, the story is completely different. King g5, king b5, king takes h5, a4, king takes g6, a5, and now the black king comes back and will be back in time. a6, bishop d5, c4, bishop a8. Yeah, if white would now push the pawn here with c5, the king would just come back. King e6, c6, king d6, and the pawn is just gone. And black's too fast. So king b6, king e5, king c7, and now black pushes his pawn g5, king b8, bishop e4, king c7. You have white obviously plays a7, then just king d4, and black is winning. So white was probably still hoping for something like king d4, king d6, and then he would maybe still get back in time. But going just plays g4, now a7, g3, c5, and now he plays his bishop back. King b8, bishop c6, and Aronian resigned, because if he plays king c7, then just king d5, just protecting the bishop, and nothing is going to happen, and black is just going to queen his pawn. Yeah, an extremely exciting game, as I found. In the end, there was this specific moment where Aronian had to decide, should he play g6 or h6, and he chose the wrong move. And it's of course extremely difficult to evaluate because one has to calculate long lines, and well, especially with not a lot of time left on the clock, it is very difficult. So actually, I'm not sure if as I'm recording this video, Carlsen was still playing against Ivanchuk, so I might take a short look. And indeed, Carlsen lost against Ivanchuk, which means that Kramnik not only caught up with Carlsen, but even got ahead of him now. He's 1.5 points ahead of Carlsen now, and this is getting really interesting now for the last 2 rounds. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.